joining us today, we have Nadia Hutchinson, who's a senior leader in the HR shared services space. So Nadia, welcome to the podcast. And we would like to start by understanding your journey so far and how have you evolved into doing what you are doing currently?
I kind of came into this arena by accident. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, after university, this is where I'm going to be and this is the arena I'm going to work in. I was fortunate enough in the early 2000s to secure a role with Standard Chartered Bank. And at that time, the bank was one of the top 5 performing banks in the world. And they were embarking on a journey in HR to start shared services. It was very much that role at that time was a regional role covering EMEA, so Europe, the Middle East and Africa. And my dominion was, about 20 odd countries. And that really was my first exposure to this world. Throughout my journey, so I was at Standard Chartered for a period of time. I then moved to British American Tobacco, and that was a end-to-end, what I call soup to nuts change of how HR operated across that business. And that business, large business, coming up to 200 countries across the world, a program that was approximately 4 years long in totality. And subsequently after that, spent some time in media, advertising, data consultancy and insights business, which was part of the WPP group. When you say fast forward in terms of the kit and the tools at your hands, very much privileged to have some of the best available there. And spent some time doing transformation there also. And more recently, in my current role, I now sit on an HR leadership team, leading a chemicals business through an HR transformation. So you can see there that there's a theme of transformation, there's a theme of change, as well as business as usual. So making sure that the lights are kept on and everything keeps working. The one thing I would say is along the way, as part of this journey, as a practitioner, I've also had what I would call my SME tool. And that for me is twofold. So mergers, acquisitions and divestments is something that I do specialize in. And last but not least at all is payroll. And each come with their own level of delight and disappointment.
So you spoke about transformation quite a few times, and you said that has been a continuous theme in your journey. So now, as somebody who has worked on HR transformation, not just in UK, but globally, what strategies would you advise organizations to employ to seamlessly bring in and integrate digital technology into HR services?
So firstly, I'd like to kind of come back on how you've asked me the question. So seamlessly is a big word. And I don't think in this space anything can be done seamlessly. That being said, transformations are successful. It's the perception of how they land and the journey that you go through as you transform. It's all about the story. So the biggest piece is not, have you selected the right technology? It's more about how you tell the story. So what's happening in the organization today that's driving the need to transform? That's your opening chapter. You then move into what do we need to actually transform? Who are our vendors? What do the contracts look like? How long will the program be? Who are the people on the program? Standard stuff. The next piece is, and a big piece, how we configure. What is it that we are building and why? And I think people don't spend enough time really doing their due diligence here. There's the lift and shift mentality. There's the transform mentality. There's extracting information from the heads of colleagues who've been in an organization a long time. All of that stuff is quite difficult to navigate and manage. But But the closing piece, or towards the end of this story that you're going to tell, is, again, you go back to the why and how we land this and what people can expect. That's a big part of the story you're going to tell. What I found successful is really talking about all of those parts of the story, but also connecting that to how we work in our everyday personal lives. So as an example, if I was to say to you, I had a cell phone in 2000 and it was this model and it was the best phone on the planet. I think at the time it would have been a BlackBerry. And I said to you, it's now 2024. I'm going to give you the best phone I ever had. And I gave you a BlackBerry. You would look at me and you would laugh. And I think that's the same thing that we need to translate when we tell the story of why transformation is needed and how we apply ourselves to make them successful. You have to use a different phone today, giving people comfort that the journey actually isn't as difficult as you're making out it can be.
So it is less about the technology. It is more about why is it needed, in what direction it needs to go, how the communication needs to be. When you talk about HR transformation, what kind of capabilities do HR professionals themselves need to lead this transformation effectively?
I love this question. So it's a multitude of capabilities. And I think even the perception of what capabilities were needed yesterday to what capabilities are needed today to what capabilities are needed tomorrow has and is changing. Today, you need to understand people's needs. And you need to be able to answer those needs and react very quickly. And you can use technology to help you do that. So over the last 5 years, and including the pandemic period, we've seen the explosion of rapid reach, the explosion of chatbots, the explosion of machine learning, the explosion of RPA within the processes and the practices. But when I have a team within my shared services world, I have, let's say, some different sets. So I have the people who are the transactional people, the people who process inquiries, the people who troubleshoot. And I would say anybody in a shared services environment has to have quite a thick skin. They need to be able to troubleshoot and firefight every single day because people are emotional and they want to have answers tomorrow. I think the second piece is around reporting, analytics, telling the story with facts and figures and truth. And that all links to your KPIs and the performance that you are delivering to the business. And then there's another bucket that talks about negotiation. How do you manage vendors? What do our contracts look like? Are we as a team who are servicing the business getting the best we need from the business? So in that, you're talking about listening. You're talking about negotiation. You're talking about influencing. You're talking about understanding the data that you get from your HRIS or your other systems so you can interpret it. And this is a skill set that's changing and growing and not fully appreciated by the business. I think businesses have seen shared services, GBS hubs, and centers as, oh, that's just a group of administrators, when actually they are the heartbeat and the engine room of many organizations.
Absolutely. You are on the advisory board of the leadership board and shared services and outsourcing network. You have your own unique perspective to these industry trends. What key insights can you share about the future of shared services, especially in the context of evolving expectation in the post-pandemic world and how we are all evolving?
What I can say is what we're talking about as an advisory board. We're talking about AI and the impact of AI on what we do, especially in the context of the fact that we have access to, we are the home of massive data sets. And what does that mean? And we don't have any answers, but we are beginning that conversation and we're trying to get those answers. We're also talking about the role of shared services and GBS in ESG. Do we just support one element of the E, the S, or the G? Environment, sustainability, governance, or do we own the lot? What is our role in this new or let's say evolving governance requirement for organizations? And as ever, every industry is talking about it. Every corner of every industry is talking about it. Is talent and talent attraction, talent retention, talent upskilling, talent management. I would say those are the kind of themes. There will be new themes coming out of upcoming conferences. So SSON has its North America conference in March in North America, and for EMEA it is in May in Portugal, and there'll be more. So anyone who's interested should keep themselves connected to that organization. I think for me personally, sitting on the advisory board, one of the things that a group of us who do sit within that advisory board have done is we've seen that there's also a need for a pipeline. So at leadership level, even if you look at age profile or experience profile, you will see that there are a lot of people who are nearing the end of the career in GBS or nearing retirement. So that means there's going to be a number of people who just drop off a cliff. And we need to sustain this industry. So we have formed, it's a group of five women. We formed a mentoring business called Conduto.com. And Conduto's aim is to coach, mentor, and help develop female talent within the GBS industry globally. So we've set ourselves that mission. We have a number of practitioners are the mentors, and our target audience at this time is mid-career female talent who have been within GBS, not just HR, it could be finance, legal, procurement, and any sector that fits into the GBS banner, to mentor and help them understand some of the challenges we faced, how we've overcome them, or to help them with practical things happening in their day-to-day career life.
Could you elaborate on how organizations can effectively balance the need of compliance with the agility required in a global workforce? Because compliance is sometimes looked as something that slows you down. And what capabilities as HR leaders, and what capabilities HR leaders should prioritize to find this delicate balance?
First and foremost, no one should ever compromise or neglect the need to be compliant. That's non-negotiable. So if that means that you and your team need to work faster, harder, smarter, that's what you need to do. I think the important thing is to understand the requirements. So the legislation says X, make sure you truly understand how to interpret that. So whatever you put in place to meet that requirement is adequate. I think it's also important that you have very good working relationships with other functions within your business. So the technology or digital department, the legal department, the facilities department. There are a number of the finance department. There are a number of different partners that you need to work with to make sure that whatever you're doing meets the legal, fiscal, and regulatory requirements that you have to comply to. I think the biggest piece is actually making sure that you as the leader understand, as I've said before, but your team members do also. So they need to understand the part that they play and the consequences. What's the impact if we get this wrong? What's the impact when we get it right? Those for me are the critical things. So agility is less important. It's about getting it right and making sure that you're compliant.
The compliance are pretty much like the brakes on the car, and a lot of people perceive brakes that stop you. So having the right systems in place, they ensure that you can move fast enough. And that is why compliances are non-negotiable. And you're also an international public speaker. And you likely have had the chance to connect with professionals from diverse backgrounds. How is this global exposure? How has this influenced your approach to HR services?
I think it's probably worthwhile explaining kind of a bit about my background to answer your question. So I am British born, but I'm of Caribbean heritage. And when I was very, very young, my parents moved to live in the Middle East. So working within and around different cultures has been part of my DNA for more years than I can say. What I would say is that it's so important to appreciate how other people live, how other people work, how other people speak, how other people appreciate religion, how they conform or don't conform. It's so, so important. And sometimes we get stuck into this is how it works for me. And we neglect to think about the good things that you can learn from other cultures, and the fusion that helps you enrich whatever you are doing, both personal and professional. So for me, how that's helped me is I listen a lot more than maybe some of my other colleagues do, because I listen to learn. I listen to say, what can I steal from Asia to make successful in Latin America? What is it that's happening in North America that could enhance something in Europe? And I genuinely feel that we have two sleeping giants in this global way of working in the continent of Africa and in the continent of Latin America. There's so many resources there, people resources, like the populations are enormous. And we have shared services hubs in those areas that perhaps haven't had as much of a highlight as others in other parts of the world, but I genuinely believe it's coming. We have to be able to be open, not to be telling people what to do in other parts of the world, but to listening and sharing and making kind of a blend of good practice.
How do you think HR leaders can contribute to fostering social responsibility within their organizations? And I want to understand and draw inspiration from your impact in mentoring business that you spoke about, Conduto. That, how can we foster social responsibility?
Organizationally, I don't think this is the burden of just HR. An organization needs to have a strategy around how it supports the environment and the communities around where it operates, or the countries that it operates in. I think there's a responsibility to the external. There's also a social responsibility to employees. And this is where HR can help, but not necessarily own and drive, but certainly help. Well-being. How do your employees actually feel about many things? Do we have policies and processes and vendors that support making them feel good and great about coming to work, and making sure that whatever they have at their disposal supports kind of work-life harmony? That's one thing. I think my social giving is Conduto, is mentoring others and helping them be the best that they can be in their journey. It's becoming more important because the pandemic shone a light on how important and how meaningful contributing socially can be. We're really just at the beginning of this, aren't we? People are finding their own purpose, and they're trying to combine that with their career, or they're changing career altogether because they have a different level of consciousness that is lending itself to how they feel about the environment around them. So I think it's a topic that isn't going to go away for a number of years. HR isn't necessarily in the driving seat, and I think more should be asked of leaders, ex-co-leaders, about how they see this particular topic.
As a mentor, what specific guidance do you provide to emerging HR professionals?
As Conduto, we actually have a formal program, and that program covers various themes that we feel are critical as part of anybody's leadership journey. Can you read a balance sheet? Do you understand the finances? Can you manage a budget? Because you need to. How do you manage people? What type of leader are you? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? How do you understand how you are so you can contribute to good leadership style? How do you manage conflict? And this isn't just, personalities that clash, but the fact that you may be trying to influence something and you're getting pushback. How do you manage that? What's your influencing style? Working with vendors. Do you understand how to read a contract? What do the terms mean? It's not that you should arrive and take things as a given. What's the role that you play there? We talk about technology, understanding the changing environment and how to navigate and work within that changing environment. And there is an element where we talk about yourself, your self-care, making sure that you come to work and are the best that you can be, because these roles are not for the weak. They are very trying. There's lots of content, there's long hours, there's travel, there's a number of different things that impact you and your well-being. And how do you manage that? So as mentors, and Conduto as a group, we cover all of those topics plus more. And of course, we are very, very clear that as a mentor, not just within Conduto, but generally, if you are mentoring, you have to make sure that you have confidence in the relationship between the mentor and the mentee, so that if they tell you something that they don't want necessarily broadcast out there in the network, that you keep that confidential. But conversely, if that individual needs support, sponsorship, if you like, to boost them, to drop their name into a conversation, to recommend them for a role, you need to understand whether that's a boundary that the two of you agreed is okay and could be part of the relationship or not. But I would say I have benefited enormously from mentors throughout my career, different mentors, and you may not have the same mentor throughout that whole entire journey, or mentors for different reasons. So it might not be one. You might have one mentor that looks after, you and your well-being, and you might have another one that looks after your career specifically, and you might have another one who's helping you transition or change career or change role. But I think what's important is you cover a multitude of themes, and it's a long-term relationship. It's not a short-term relationship. And you understand between the two of you, your mentor and you as a mentee, what the boundaries are.
You have a unique, so you worked as a school governor at Hillmead Primary School, and that brings a unique perspective. How was that experience outside the corporate world, and how has that influenced your leadership style? And what lessons can, say, HRs can learn and apply to enhance their approach to their work?
I think I have to start with my motivation for becoming a school governor. So my motivation was actually at that time in my life to understand a different side of how the education system works in the UK. And I became a school governor for a school that I can walk to. It's very local to where I live. And that school, so in England, there's a grading system. The government kind of grades schools by performance. And this school was in special measures, which basically means it was at the bottom of the ladder. And if it didn't improve, the government would actually physically come in and take over the running of the school, which is not a good thing. So I joined that board to make a difference, to have some impact. And the first thing that I learned was the governance structure that we have in a corporate. So I've never worked for public sector. I've always worked for listed organizations is very different. The structure is different, the roles are different, the way the roles interact is very, very different. The access to information you have is very, very different. So that kind of opened my eyes up to different types of questions I could and should ask in the workplace and vice versa. Secondly, there's something magical about being around children. And it takes, when you're working in a high pressure corporate environment, being around a different age demographic, it's humbling, actually. They can't express themselves in the same way. They don't behave in the same way as we do in the workplace. And it just gives you a different perspective. And last but not least, I would like to think that I come to work or I show up at work for a purpose. And as a governor, my purpose was to help the school improve. And that's what I do in day-to-day work. So the three kind of blended together quite well.
So what advice, if you had to share one piece of advice to HR professionals making that transition and want to make an impact in the global HR leadership, what would that be?
Listen and learn. Because as much as you are bringing expertise to the table, and that's why you're in the role that you're in, there is always something to learn. There's something around the corner that you do not know. So the one piece of advice for me is listen and learn. Don't assume that you know everything, because you don't. And I always lead my teams with, I'm your leader. I'm here to make you shine. It's not about me shining. It's about you shining. And by default, we all shine. But equally, I do not have all the answers. So you are a specialist in X, you are a specialist in Y, you are a specialist in Z. And together we form the circle. And I can only do that if I listen and learn.
So thank you so much. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. A lot of interesting nuances have come out in the conversation with you.
Thank you for inviting me once again to be part of the journey here and part of the conversation.